Thank you. Thanks very much for the introduction, Matteo, and thank you all for being here. I know it's the last session of the day. I also know it's the last session before you go to the bar and have some nice drinks, so I'm sorry in advance for teasing you with some lovely pictures of nice drinks. But I'm going to talk to you today about operational excellence and innovation. And this morning we heard a lot about logic and magic and inspiration and perspiration, and I'm sorry to say I'm going to be talking about the logic and the perspiration. So just a very brief introduction to Diageo for anybody who doesn't know us already. So we've about 34,000 employees. We operate in 180 markets. Our sales value per year is about 12 billion. And we've about 15,000 employees in supply, the part of the business that I work in. You probably know some of our brands. Matteo mentioned some of them there. Johnny Walker, Smirnoff, Guinness, Baileys would be some of the bigger ones. But it would be rude not to mention Kettle One, which is distilled here in Amsterdam and has been for many hundreds of years by the Nollet family. Let me just show you a very quick video just to bring to life the brands a bit better than I could. So that was the magic, now to the logic. So the question we asked ourselves, about 3 years ago, we were setting up our operational excellence function in Diageo. And the question we asked was, should we apply operational excellence to innovation? Because it's a bit of a conundrum. You know, innovation is a very creative, free-flowing endeavor. Operational excellence is all about control. But I think the answer we came to was yes, it is worth applying. Before I get into how we did that, let me just explain briefly what we mean by an operational excellence framework in case you haven't seen this before. So basically what this is about, it's about codifying best practice, externally benchmarked best practice in all areas of the supply chain. So planning, logistics, manufacturing, innovation, governance, etc. And the whole idea is that you have a standard set of performance KPIs for each part of the business, a standard way of running your business, standard ways of working to actually deliver your day-to-day activities, standard role profiles, organizations, capabilities. You get the picture. It's a standard blueprint for how to run the organization. And I guess when you talk about that in the context of innovation, the question is, well, is innovation more about creativity or more about control? But I think the answer certainly that we came up with was it's both. And I think I heard that this morning as well with the talk about magic and logic and inspiration and perspiration. We did come across some research done by Corporate Executive Board, which is now part of Gartner, which said that sustained innovators, companies that were really good at innovating in the long term and repeatedly, were really good at two things. One was they spent the time being highly consumer-centric, really getting close to the customer and understanding what the best concept was. But once they got that landed and once they knew what they wanted to develop, they then had highly codified and efficient ways of getting that to market. And so that's what we tried to emulate here. So in terms of concept development, highly consumer-centric, really very little constraints. Our product development teams pretty much just work to get the best possible product without even considering cost or what goes into it. Then we work on making that into something that we can manufacture at a profitable margin. So when we looked at operational excellence for innovation, we said, what are the really key bits? What's the most important stuff that you need to codify and get right to be successful at innovation? And we came up with these 4 C's, which were creativity, codification, control, and capability. So I'm just going to run through very briefly a little bit about what we did under each of those 4 C's, and then I'll just show you some of the results and a couple of case studies. So creativity, when we talk about creativity here, I'm not really talking about a lot of the upfront ideation work. I'm really talking about the long-term R&D, the research and development that lays the groundwork to put new products out there in sort of 3 to 5 to 10 years' time. So when we started this journey 3 years ago, we said, right, how can we have a bigger impact from science and technology on our brand growth aspirations? So we came up with a new R&D model. So we looked at how we do R&D all across Diageo. And we said, let's reframe that model and make it more consumer-centric and more focused on how we're going to grow our business over the next 10 years. And the way we did that was, we got each of our category leads, so the leads for whiskey, for creams, for beer, etc., and we got them to pair up with the R&D leads for that category. And we said, let's take a look at your brand strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, and what are the big growth objectives for you? And then let's talk about how R&D can support that. So rather than starting with what can we do technically and how can we sell that, we turned it the other way around. And what we found as a result of that was that actually there was a lot more commonality across some of the brands and categories than you might expect. So we put in place an R&D council, which is essentially the heads of R&D from all the major regions and all the major technical disciplines, and a chairperson, and we put them together quarterly to review each of those R&D growth maps and prioritise our R&D effort across the world. And this achieved two things. One, it was achieved better productivity and return on investment from R&D, but it also meant that our R&D approach was much more focused on the growth needs of our brands. So just a couple of applications that came out of that. One was wood science. So as you know, I'm sure a lot of spirits are matured in wood casks, particularly whiskey and rum. But how you mature the spirits and how you treat those wooden casks and how you char them and how you manipulate them has a huge impact on the flavour. So by doing research and development into that area, we're able to do two things. One is we're able to increase our return on assets, so reduce our waste stock during maturation. But probably more importantly and more excitingly, it allows us to produce some really exciting new products. So some examples would be Johnny Walker Double Black, which was introduced maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and some of the Bundaberg limited edition rums. These have become so famous now that each time they're launched in Australia, people queue outside the factory for the first editions. And the heart of that really is wood science. It's understanding what happens in barrels when spirits are aging, manipulating that to produce even better products. The other area is, or one other area, is fermentation science. So every drop of alcohol we produce is produced by yeast. So it really serves us well to understand yeast and really be able to manipulate how yeast work. So two advantages from that. One is return on assets and utilization. So the faster you can get fermentations to happen, the more efficiently, the better, obviously. But again, more excitingly is the new products we can create. And one of the most exciting ones of recent days was the Pure Brew, which is a Guinness brewed lager. It's fully brewed, so what that means is there's no sugars or carbohydrates left in it, just like a normal beer. But there's also no alcohol. So we've gotten the yeast to basically ferment a beer but not produce any alcohol, which means you get a really good quality product with no alcohol. So that was just a little bit about creativity. Having done that, then we said, okay, what are the bits of innovation that we really want to codify? So we kind of stayed away from the front end, and we said we leave that be as free-flowing as possible, but let's look at the process. So we started with our stage gate process, and we said from stage 0 to 3, so hopefully this is familiar for anybody who runs a stage gate process, but approximately stage 3 is the point at which it turns from concept into actually something you're commercializing. So we said, to the left of stage 3, let's keep it open, creative, no constraints, very much, so long as it's a relatively clear brief, leave it wide open. But from stage 3 onwards, then, it's really tight and codified, very much in control. And two specific examples of how we did that. One was we put in a pipeline planning and prioritization process, which we called 3P, very similar to an S&OP process for managing a business. But again, what this did was just force us to look at our portfolio. We talk about 1,000 projects a year, so about 200 innovations, 800 renovations. So it just forced us to look at that 1,000 projects and say, are these really the ones we want to be working on? We saw the Pareto principle earlier, and that very much applies to innovation projects. So by putting in this process, in the first year, in the first region we launched this, we doubled the average scale of project overnight, just by focusing on what we were doing and resizing. The second thing I wanted to mention is world-class commercialization, and this was really just a set of standard codified ways of commercializing a product that would guarantee you get it out the door right first time. And I'll talk a little bit later about what that meant in performance terms. The other thing which I wanted to mention is the hashtag Simplify. So this is a hashtag we created on our internal social media. And it was all about simplifying our business, getting decisions made more quickly. And so when we talked about innovation, we said, well, what can we do in innovation to make it faster and decisions made more quickly? And we looked at our gate papers, so the business cases that were produced for innovation projects at each stage of the process. And what we were finding was that some of these documents were 60 to 80 pages long. And they were great documents, don't get me wrong. They were fantastic marketing plans, detailed manufacturing plans, lots of history about why we were developing the product, why it was right. But really, what the gatekeepers needed for decision-making was, how much is it going to make, what's the risk involved, and what are you looking for to get to the next stage? So we went overnight from 60 pages down to a 5-page maximum. So we've got a sort of a mandatory project checklist on page 1, and the next 4 pages they just tell the story and say what you're asking for. So overnight, we really freed up a lot of time in terms of decision-making, and it also had an impact on speed to market. And it also meant that product developers were spending more time developing products than actually writing gate papers, which is obviously what we want them doing. So that was a little bit about codification. I could say more, but I'm sure you won't want me to. In terms of control then, Now that we had these systems in place, so we've got our R&D framework established, we've codified how we do innovation, then we said, right, how are we going to control performance? So the first thing really was to understand what are we going to measure. So we looked at the Gartner hierarchy of NPI metrics. This is something that Gartner produced as part of their annual supply chain top 25 ranking report last year. And we found that actually a lot of what they recommend is exactly what we're measuring. The ones we're not using, the measures we're not using around process, are largely ones that probably apply more to higher tech organizations or industries that deal with a huge number of parts. So for us, really, it was around predictable returns to shareholders, so are we making money? Time to value, are we getting there fast enough? And then some operational excellence metrics. So we took this and we converted it into our metrics here, which were, from a business performance point of view, we measure sales value, project scale, project growth, and project sustainability. And then from an operational excellence point of view, we measure perfect project delivery, which I'll explain in a moment. And then we focus on speed to market, productivity, and project scale. So these are the three things that tell us we're doing the right stuff and we're doing it efficiently. And along the bottom there are the strategic objectives we set ourselves. So we said by 2020, financial year 20, we want to maintain leading performance, but at the same time have our time to market and double the NSV per full-time equivalent employed. So essentially it was just about getting more productive at innovation. Just to describe the perfect project delivery KPI, because this is the level 1 KPI. So every market in Diageo across the world reports this monthly, and it's consolidated and reported globally. So we started off by saying, if at gate 5, that's the last gate before you launch your product, you have met your time, cost, and quality objectives, that's a hit. That's perfect project delivery. And after a number of years of achieving about 99% of that, we said, okay, let's make it a bit more challenging. So we moved the commitment back to gate 3. So gate 3 is the point at which you're given a concept, you don't yet know how to manufacture it, and yet we make the commitment against time, cost, and quality. As you'd expect, we get a performance dip, but then it came back up. So then we said, right, let's change the focus. If you look at health and safety, and if you talk about lost time accidents, nobody says, we had 99 days, well, they do say we have 99 days without an accident, but they'll say what happened on the day you had an accident. What was the accident, and how can you prevent it happening again? So we took the same approach with innovation. We said, right, instead of saying 99%, we're going to say how many absolute misses have we had this year, root cause every one of them, and try and stop it from happening again. And then finally, just this year, we've taken the same measure, but we've increased the stringency. So as well as time, cost, and quality, we've added a few extra things. So if your project budget goes over in any way, if you have a case fill issue in the first 3 months, if you have a quality issue in the first 3 months, or my favourite one is expedition. So if you've met your timelines, but only because you air freighted the product to market, all of those things would constitute a miss. So how we manage that then is through a very typical operational excellence tier performance management system. So tier 1 is the shop floor tier, if you like. So if this is manufacturing, that would be the manufacturing plant. For innovation, that's the project team. And what happens here basically is if there's an issue, it gets escalated to the next tier, and so on all the way up until it gets resolved. So very, very little, as you can imagine, gets escalated all the way up. But we will often have things like, for example, if CapEx approval hasn't been granted for a project and the timeline is under threat, that will get very quickly escalated up. So we find this management system does make innovation run just like we'd run a plant or just like we'd run logistics, similar type of rigor. And we use visual management very strongly for that. Mostly, actually, we do it electronically, but I wanted to show this because this is our Tier 6 performance room. So this is where President of Global Supply comes every month and looks at all the KPIs for the global business. And as you can see, third from the right there, innovation and brand change is reported monthly. So it's got the same degree of visibility as any other supply chain KPI. So just a couple of results. So what happened when we did this? Well, if we go back to financial year 14, we were hitting about 99% perfect project delivery. We introduced that gate 3 target I talked about, and that performance dropped. Then it went up again the next year. Then we introduced the extended definition, it dropped, and then this year to date at least, it's going up. At the same time as we introduced all of this codification, we've been tracking speed to market. We started at a baseline of about 42 weeks when we first started measuring, and we're down somewhere between 20 and 30 now, and as you can see, we're on track for our financial year 20 target. And I suppose most importantly, because a lot of people say to me, speed to market doesn't matter. If you're selling a product for Christmas, it's no point in having it in October. Christmas is when you want it, and likewise with Father's Day and Chinese New Year, a lot of the seasonal occasions that we tend to innovate against. But what it does do is it drives productivity, and so that's the end game of this. It's actually making our organisation more productive, better return on investment, and better project scale. So the last of the 4 C's I want to mention is capability. So when I put up that triangle earlier on about operational excellence framework, one of the areas was organisation, role profiles, and capability. And this is one we feel is really important for innovation. obviously we recruit people to be highly creative and highly good at what they do. So most product developers come and hit the ground running when they start the job. But what we do find and what they tell us is, I'm a great product developer, but I don't know how to develop products at Diageo. So that's really where we've tried to focus our capability building. And we've done that in 3 ways. The first one is a suite of e-learning. So we have gamified learning, like this innovation game, which guides people through how you do innovation at Diageo through an online game, as well as some very specific things, like, for example, videos on how to use PlanView, which is what we use for project management. Then we have a Diageo TV, which is like an internal YouTube channel, and you can learn everything there, from sort of about the company to about specific brands or to about innovation specifically. And then the final piece we put in specifically for R&D leaders was the R&D Leaders Programme. And this is basically, it's 3 parts to this framework. The first one is developing strong baseline technical and management skills. This is fairly standard stuff. It's about 20% of the time, and it's coursework or external learning. The next piece is planned experiential learning. So this is the on-the-job, about 70% of the time. And what's different about what we do here is we actually map every single person in R&D, and we say, right, what's their potential, what are their aspirations, where do they want to be, and how do we plan in that experience proactively so that they get it, rather than leave it to circumstance and career and the vagaries of people leaving or not leaving. So what this means is we actually put people into roles, sometimes before they're ready, or sometimes when those roles aren't actually vacant, but it just means we're proactively getting them the right experience to grow as R&D leaders very quickly. And then the final piece which we put in, which is probably 5% of the time, but probably most of the effort, is the R&D Leaders Masterclasses. And essentially what this is, we take our most experienced R&D leaders from around the business, as well as our best business partners and R&D leaders from outside the business, and we put them together with our emerging leaders in a sort of a virtual classroom scenario. And then we talk to them about a subject. It could be how to get the best out of external partnerships, could be how to lead and motivate technical professionals. But we just try and impart the sort of knowledge and wisdom that's very difficult to codify into classroom learning, but just put it into a virtual learning environment. So that's the 4C OpEx approach to innovation. Obviously there's a lot more detail, but I'm conscious it's the last session of the day, so I won't go too deep into it. I thought it might be useful just to show you a couple of case studies, not really directly related to what I've been speaking about, but just illustrations of how we're working to constantly improve our speed to market. So there's just 2 of these. The first one is agile manufacturing. So Africa is one of our biggest growth markets at the moment. It's growing in scale, the demographics are working in our favour, and the spirits business, we have a huge beer business there, but a very small spirits business, but spirits is growing rapidly. So if you look at the size of Africa and the number of markets, and spirits is a very high capex investment type of business, if you look at distillation, maturation, aging stock, packaging and so on. So what we do here is we pull together a modular manufacturing solution. So these are shipping containers, it's blending and packaging lines. They are built in the UK, tested and commissioned, and they leave the UK fully operational. And then they literally land in market, and they're quite literally and physically dropped into the market. And 4 weeks from arrival in market, product is on the shelf. So what this means is that we can very quickly get products into a lot of markets at very low risk, because the cost of these is obviously a lot less than investing in bricks and mortar plant. And it also means that we can take a few gambles on what products we want to launch, and if they're not successful, there's very little investment involved. We've got 4 of these going at the moment in 4 African markets. And in fact, the 4th one is on its 2nd rotation. So we've actually served 5 markets. So the market which the 4th one was taken out of is now having proper long-term investment put in. So that's one example, and that's obviously greatly improved our speed to market for Africa. And the other one I just wanted to mention, just coming back to maybe the magic and the inspiration part, is our Open Gate Brewery. So what this is we've put in a bar in the middle of the pilot brewery, in the middle of St James's Gate Brewery in Dublin. Now this is somewhere that I know really well, because I worked there for many years, about 25 odd years ago, and it didn't look like this then. But what's amazing is it really is a working brewery. So it's we've got 1 hectolitre and 10 hectolitre scale breweries, so it's 100 and 10,000 litre breweries. And basically, whatever's being produced there gets put on tap in this bar. Consumers can come in off the street. Now, you do need to book it. It's not quite an open door, but you book online and you come on a Thursday or Friday evening. And as you can see from the blackboard behind there will be a range of products on sale. Some of them will be products that we've actually produced and developed and are on sale in the market, but not necessarily the Irish market. Some of them will be products that we're actively working on, and some of them will just be things that the brewers made that day because they thought it was fun. But what's great about it is you get, as well as being a sort of a tourist experience, it's also a really valuable source of informal consumer feedback. And you're sort of with the consumer on their journey as they actually sit down, enjoy the product and talk about it, as opposed to the more structured sort of sampling that we would traditionally do. So they were just 2 case studies to bring it to life, and that
is it. Thank you for your attention.